There we are. Hello, everybody. I know that a lot of you popped in, said hello. I know some of you are in bed. JB, I hope you're doing well, brother. It's good to see you. Woo. That's good coffee. Hey, Jesse. I appreciate you being here. Today has definitely been a day. Yeah, it's good to see you too. It was starting to look like nobody was going to be able to hang around, which is totally fine. I know it's super late. Today was a day I was really looking forward to this, but I got so caught up with work that, man, I forgot to charge everything. Like, my phone was close to dead. The Kindle is dead. I got it plugged in right now, so we're gonna see if it'll hold at least through tonight. No worries at all, Pedro. It's good to see you, fam. Hungry Hollow, it's good to see you. You're not lying, yeah. Yep, no worries. So I'm hoping that we can all just kind of unwind and relax as this stream was intended for, so we can read a little bit, childish stories. We are journeying through our land of Oz. Pedro, it's good to see you, brother. And that is quite alright, man. I know it's kind of late, so if you do got a dip, you got to. But totally appreciate you being here, man. But yeah, we will go ahead and pretty well just jump right into it tonight. So we can make it through our chapters, and I will, of course, still stop in between and see what's going on in the chat. So, but super appreciate you all being here and joining me on this Monday. I hope you all had wonderful Mondays and ready to just chill. So I got my coffee, I got my dying Kindle, and we're going to see if it will last. It should last. So. But we're going to get into the marvelous land of Oz. And when we last left our heroes, Tip, the Sawhorse, Jack Pumpkinhead, they were all floating in a river. And they decided that they were all going to journey to the land of the Winkies to enlist the help of the Tin Woodman. So that is where we are. And we are going to start up with chapter 9. And we're going to attempt to go through our next 9 chapters, or chapter 10, excuse me. And we're going to try and get through chapter 18 or 19. I do have to try and split up the last read because I think the rest of the book is pretty short. So even depending on that, we might even bust through it tonight, depending on how much longer it is. But we'll see what we get through. Nope, no worries at all, man. Super appreciate you being here, and trust me, the sleep is there. But if you do fall asleep, man, I hope you sleep well, and have a pleasant tomorrow. Alright, getting into chapter 10, The Journey to the Tin Woodman. Tip was well soaked in dripping water from every angle of his body, but he managed to lean forward and shout in the ear of the Sawhorse, "Keep still, you fool, keep still." The horse at once ceased struggling and floated calmly upon the surface, its wooden body being as buoyant as a raft. "What does that word fool mean?" inquired the horse. "It's a term of reproach," answered Tip, somewhat ashamed of the expression. "I only use it when I'm angry." "Then it pleases me to be able to call you a fool in return," said the horse, "for I did not make the river nor put it in our way. So only a term of reproach is fit for one who becomes angry with me for falling into the water." "That is quite evident," replied Tip, "so I will acknowledge myself in the wrong." Then he called out to the Pumpkinhead, "Are you all right, Jack?" There was no reply, so the boy called to the king, "Are you all right, your majesty?" The Scarecrow groaned. "I'm all wrong somehow," he said, in his weak voice. "How very wet this water is." Tip was bound so tightly by the cord that he could not turn his head to look at his companions. So he said to the sawhorse, "Paddle with your legs toward the shore." The horse obeyed, and although their progress was slow, they finally reached the opposite riverbank, at a place where it was low enough to enable the creature to scramble upon dry land. With some difficulty, the boy managed to get his knife out of his pocket and cut the cords that bound the riders to one another and to the wooden horse. He heard the scarecrow fall to the ground with a mushy sound, and then he himself quickly dismounted and looked at his friend Jack. The wooden body, with its gorgeous clothing, still sat upright upon the horse's back, but the pumpkin head was gone, and only the sharpened stick that served for a neck was visible. As for the scarecrow, the straw in its body had shaken down with the jolting and packed itself into its legs and its lower part of its body, which appeared very plump and round, while his upper half seemed to be empty sack. Upon his head the scarecrow still wore the heavy crown, which had been sewn on to prevent his losing it, but the head was now so damp and limp that the weight of the gold and jewels sagged forward and crushed the painted face into a mass of wrinkles that made him look exactly like a Japanese pug dog, excuse me. Tip would have laughed had he not been so anxious about his man Jack, but the scarecrow, however damaged, was all there, while the pumpkin head was so necessary to Jack's existence, was missing. So the boy seized the long pole that fortunately lay near at hand and anxiously turned again towards the river. Far out upon the waters he sighted the golden hue of the pumpkin, which gently bobbed up and down with the motion of the waves. At that moment it was quite out of Tip's reach, but after a time it floated nearer and still nearer until the boy was able to reach it with his pole and draw it to the shore. He then brought it to the top of the bank, carefully wiped the water from its pumpkin face with his handkerchief, and ran with it to Jack and replaced the head upon the man's neck. "Dear me," were Jack's first words. "What a dreadful experience! I wonder if water is liable to spoil pumpkins." Tip did not think a reply was necessary, for he knew that the scarecrow also stood in need of his help. So he carefully removed the straw from the king's body and legs and spread it out in the sun to dry. The wet clothing he hung over the body of the sawhorse. "If water spoils pumpkins," observed Jack, with a deep sigh, "then my days are numbered." "I've never noticed that water spoils pumpkins," returned Tip, "unless the water happens to be boiling. If your head isn't cracked, my friend, you must be in fairly good condition." "Oh, my head isn't cracked in the least," declared Jack more cheerfully. "Then don't worry," retorted the boy. "Care once killed the cat." "Then," said Jack seriously, "I am very glad indeed that I am not a cat." The sun was fast drying their clothes, and Tip stirred up his Majesty's straw so that the warm rays might absorb the moisture and make it as crisp and dry as ever. When this had been accomplished, he stuffed the scarecrow into symmetrical shape and smoothed out his face so he wore his usual gay and charming expression. "Thank you very much," said the monarch brightly, as he walked about and found himself to be well balanced. "There are several distinct advantages in being a scarecrow, for if one has friends near at hand to repair damages, nothing very serious can happen to you." "I wonder if hot sunshine is liable to crack pumpkins," said Jack, with an anxious ring in his voice. "Not at all, not at all," replied the scarecrow gaily. "All you need fear, my boy, is old age. When your golden youth has decayed, we shall quickly part company, but you needn't look forward to it. We'll discover the fact ourselves and notify you. But come, let us resume our journey. I am anxious to greet my friend the Tin Woodman." So they remounted the sawhorse, Tip holding on to the post, the pumpkin head clinging to Tip, and the scarecrow with both arms around the wooden form of Jack. "Go slowly for now, there's no danger of pursuit," said Tip to his steed. "All right," responded the creature, in a voice rather gruff. "Aren't you a little hoarse?" asked the pumpkin head politely. The sawhorse gave an angry prance and rolled one naughty eye backward toward Tip. "See here," he growled, "can't you protect me from insult?" "To be sure," answered Tip soothingly. "I am sure Jack meant no harm, and it will not do for us to quarrel, you know. We must all remain good friends." I'll have nothing more to do with that pumpkin-head, declared the Sawhorse viciously. He loses his head too easily to suit me. There seemed to be no fitting reply to the speech, so for a time they rode along in silence. After a while, the Scarecrow remarked, "This reminds me of old times. It was upon this grassy knoll that I once saved Dorothy from the stinging of bees with the Wicked Witch of the West." Stinging of bees, from the stinging bees of the Wicked Witch of the West. "Do stinging bees injure pumpkins?" asked Jack, glancing around fearfully. "They're all dead, so it doesn't matter," replied the Scarecrow. "And here's where Nick Chopper destroyed the Wicked Witch's gray wolves." "Who is Nick Chopper?" asked Tip. "That is the name of my friend the Tin Woodman," answered His Majesty. "And here's where the winged monkeys captured and bound us and flew away with little Dorothy," he continued, after they had traveled a little way further. "Do winged monkeys ever eat pumpkins?" asked Jack, with a shiver of fear. "I do not know, but you have little cause to worry, for the winged monkeys are now the slaves of Glinda the Good, who owns the golden cap and commands their services," said the Scarecrow, reflectively. Then the stuffed monarch became lost in thought, recalling the days of past adventures, and the Sawhorse rocked and rolled over the flower-strewn fields and carried its riders swiftly upon their way. Twilight fell, by and by, and then the dark shadows of the night, so Tip stopped the horse, and they all proceeded to dismount. "I'm tired out," said the boy, yawning wearily, "and the grass is soft and cool. Let us lie down here and sleep until morning." "I can't sleep," said Jack. "I never do," said the Scarecrow. "I do not even know what sleep is," said the Sawhorse. "Still, we must have consideration for this poor boy who is made of flesh and blood and bone, and gets tired," suggested the Scarecrow, in his usual thoughtful manner. "I remember it was the same way with little Dorothy. We always had to sit throughout the night while she slept." "I'm sorry," said Tip meekly, "but I can't help it, and I'm dreadfully hungry, too." "Here is a new danger," remarked Jack gloomily. "I hope you are not fond of eating pumpkins." "Not unless they are stewed and made into pies," answered the boy, laughing, "so have no fears of me, friend Jack." "What a coward that Pumpkinhead is," said the Sawhorse scornfully. "You might be a coward yourself if you knew you were liable to spoil," retorted Jack angrily. There, interrupted the Scarecrow. "Don't let us quarrel. We all have our weaknesses, dear friends, so we must strive to be considerate of one another, and since this poor boy is hungry and has nothing whatever to eat, let us all remain quiet and allow him to sleep, for it is said that in sleep a mortal may forget even hunger." "Thank you," exclaimed Tip gratefully. "Your Majesty is full as good as you are wise." And that is saying a good deal. He then stretched upon the grass, and, using his stuffed form of the Scarecrow for a pillow, was presently fast asleep. "Hey, Ricardo. Ripping and fishing? How's it going?" "It's good to see you, man." "Hey, Lean, I'm in the office today. Can't stick around, but I really enjoy the story. Sorry, workers. Oh, man. No, that is all right. That is all right. I'm still going to go ahead and read through. I know there's a lot of people who can't stick around tonight, and that's okay. It was definitely meant to just chill, read, watch it back. I just don't want anybody to miss the story. But it is really good to see you all. I hope you're all doing well. It's good to see you, Ricardo. I appreciate you being here. As we are going to get into Chapter 11. The Nickel-Plated Emperor. Tip awoke soon after dawn, but the Scarecrow had already risen and plucked with his clumsy fingers a double handful of ripe berries from some bushes nearby. These the boy ate greedily, finding him an ample breakfast, and afterward the little party resumed its journey. After an hour's ride, they reached the summit of a hill, from whence they espied the city of the Winkies, and noted the tall domes of the Emperor's palace rising from the clusters of more modest dwellings. The Scarecrow became greatly animated at this sight and exclaimed, "How delighted I shall be to see my old friend the Tin Woodman again. I hope that he rules his people more successfully than I have ruled mine." "Is the Tin Woodman the Emperor of the Winkies?" asked the horse. "Yes, indeed. They invited him to rule over them, soon after the Wicked Witch was destroyed. And as Nick Chopper has the best heart in all the world, I am sure he has proved an excellent and able emperor." "I thought that emperor was a title of a person who rules an empire," said Tip, "and the country of the Winkies is only a kingdom." "Don't mention that to the Tin Woodman," exclaimed the Scarecrow earnestly. "You would hurt his feelings terribly. He is a proud man, as he has every reason to be, and it pleases him to be termed emperor rather than king." "I am sure it makes no difference to me," replied the boy. The Sawhorse now ambled forward at a pace so fast that its riders had hard work to stick upon its back. So there was a little further conversation until they drew up beside the palace steps. An aged Winky, dressed in uniform of silver cloth, came forward to assist them to alight. Said the Scarecrow to his personage, "Show us at once to your master, the Emperor." The man looked from one to the other of the party in an embarrassed way, and finally answered, "I fear I must ask you all to wait for a time. The Emperor is not receiving this morning." "How is that?" inquired the Scarecrow anxiously. "I hope nothing has happened to him." "Oh, no, nothing serious," returned the man. "But this is His Majesty's day for being polished, and just now his august presence is thickly smeared with Putz pomade." "Oh, I see," cried the Scarecrow, greatly reassured. "My friend was ever inclined to be a dandy, and I suppose he is now more proud than ever of his personal appearance." "He is indeed," said the man, with a polite bow. "Our mighty Emperor has lately caused himself to be nickel-plated." "Good gracious!" the Scarecrow exclaimed at hearing this. "If his whip bears the same polish, how sparkling it must be! But show us in. I am sure the Emperor will receive us, even in his present state." "The Emperor's state is always magnificent," said the man, "but I will venture to tell him of your arrival, and will receive his commands concerning you." So the party followed the servant into a splendid anteroom, and the Sawhorse ambled awkwardly after them, having no knowledge that a horse might be expected to remain outside. The travelers were at first somewhat awed by their surroundings, and even the Scarecrow seemed impressed as he examined the rich hangings of silver cloth. Caught up into knots and fastened with tiny silver axes, upon a handsome center table stood a large silver oil can, richly engraved with scents from the past adventures of the Tin Woodman, Dorothy, the Cowardly Lion, and the Scarecrow. The lines of the engraving being traced upon the silver and yellow gold, on the walls hung several portraits, that of the Scarecrow seeming to be the most prominent and carefully executed, while the large painting of the famous Wizard of Oz, in act of presenting the Tin Woodman with a heart, covered almost one entire end of the room. While the visitors gazed at these in silent admiration, they suddenly heard a loud voice in the next room exclaim, "Well, well, well, what a great surprise!" And then the door busted open, and Nick Chopper rushed into their midst and caught the Scarecrow in a close and loving embrace that creased him into many folds and wrinkles. "My dear old friend, my noble comrade," cried the Tin Woodman joyfully, "how delighted I am to meet you once again." And then he released the Scarecrow and held him at arm's length while he surveyed the beloved painted features. But alas! The face of the Scarecrow and many portions of his body bore great blotches of Putz pomade, for the Tin Woodman, in his eagerness to welcome his friends, had quite forgotten the condition of his toilet and had rubbed the thick coating of paste from his own body to that of his comrade. "Dear me," said the Scarecrow dolefully, "what a mess I'm in." "Never mind, my friend," returned the Tin Woodman. "I'll send you to my imperial laundry, and you'll come out as good as new." "Won't I be mangled?" asked the Scarecrow. "No, indeed," was the reply. "But tell me, how come your Majesty's here? And who are your companions?" The Scarecrow, with great politeness, introduced Tip and Jack Pumpkinhead, and the latter personage seemed to seemed to interest the Tin Woodman greatly. "You are not very substantial, I must admit," said the Emperor, "but you are certainly unusual, and therefore worthy to become a member of our select society." "Thank you, Your Majesty," said Jack humbly. "I hope you're enjoying good health," continued the Woodman. "At present, yes," replied the Pumpkinhead with a sigh. "But I am in constant terror of the day when I shall spoil." "Nonsense," said the Emperor, but in a kindly sympathetic tone. "Do not, I beg of you, dampen today's sun with your showers of tomorrow. For before your head has time to spoil, you can have it canned, and in that way it may be preserved indefinitely." Tip, during this conversation, was looking at the Woodman with undisguised amazement, and noticed that the celebrated Emperor of the Winkies was composed entirely of pieces of tin, neatly soldered and riveted together into the form of a man. He rattled and clanked a little as he moved, but in the main he seemed to be most cleverly constructed, and his appearance was only marred by the thick coating of polished paste that covered him from head to toe. Marred. The boy's intent gaze gave the Tin Woodman... You know what? Start over. The boy's intent gaze caused the Tin Woodman to remember that he was not in the most presentable condition. So he begged his friends to excuse him while he retired to his private apartment, and allowed his servants to polish him. This was accomplished in a short time, and when the Emperor returned, his nickel-plated body shone so magnificently that the Scarecrow heartily congratulated him on his improved appearance. "That nickel plate was, I confess, a happy thought," said Nick, "and it was the more necessary because I had become somewhat scratched during my adventurous experiences. You will observe this engraved star upon my left breast. It not only indicates where my excellent heart lies, but covers very neatly the patch made by the wonderful wizard when he placed that valued organ into my breast with his own skillful hands." "Is your heart, then, a hand organ?" asked the Pumpkinhead curiously. "By no means," responded the Emperor with dignity. "It is, I am convinced, a strictly orthodox heart, although somewhat larger and warmer than most people possess." Then he turned to the Scarecrow and asked, "Are your subjects happy and contented, my dear friend?" "I cannot say," was the reply, "for the girls of Oz have risen in revolt and driven me out of the Emerald City." "Great goodness!" cried the Tin Woodman. "What a calamity! They surely do not complain of your wise and gracious rule." "No, but they say that it is a poor rule that don't work both ways," answered the Scarecrow. "And these females are also of their opinion that men have ruled the land long enough. So they have captured my city, robbed the treasury of all its jewels, and are running things to suit themselves." "Dear me, what an extraordinary idea!" cried the Emperor, who was both shocked and surprised. "And I heard some of them say," said Tip, "that they intend to march here and capture the castle and the city of the Tin Woodman." "Ah, we must not give them time to do that," said the Emperor quickly. "We will go at once to recapture the Emerald City and place the Scarecrow again upon its throne." "I was sure you would help me," remarked the Scarecrow in a pleased voice. "How large an army can you assemble?" "We do not need an army," replied the Woodman. "We four, with the aid of my gleaming axe, are enough to strike terror into the hearts of the rebels." "We 5, corrected the Pumpkinhead. 5, repeated the Tin Woodman. "Yes, the Sawhorse is brave and fearless," answered Jack, forgetting his recent quarrel with the quadruped. The Tin Woodman looked around in a puzzled way for the Sawhorse, and, until now, had remained quietly standing in a corner, where the Emperor had not noticed him. Tip immediately called the odd-looking creature to them, and it approached so awkwardly that it nearly upset the beautiful center table and the engraved oil can. "I begin to think," remarked the Tin Woodman as he looked earnestly at the Sawhorse, "that wonders will never cease. How came this creature alive?" "I did it with a magic powder," modestly asserted the boy, "and the Sawhorse has been very useful to us." "He enabled us to escape the rebels," added the Scarecrow. Then we must surely accept him as a comrade, declared the Emperor. A live sawhorse is a distinct novelty, and should prove an interesting study. Does he know anything? Well, I cannot claim any great experiences in life, the sawhorse answered for himself. But I seem to learn very quickly, and often occurs to me that I know more than any of those around me. Perhaps you do, said the Emperor, for experience does not always mean wisdom. But time is precious just now, so let us quickly make preparations to start upon our journey. The Emperor called his Lord High Chancellor and instructed him how to run the kingdom during his absence. Meanwhile, the scarecrow was taken apart and the painted sack that served him for a head was carefully laundered and restuffed with the brains originally given to him by the great wizard. His clothes were also cleaned and pressed by the imperial tailors, and his crown polished and again sewed upon his head. For the Tin Woodman insisted he should not renounce his badge of royalty. The Scarecrow now presented a very respectable appearance, and although in no way addicted to vanity, he was quite pleased with himself, and strutted a trifle as he walked. While this was being done, Tip mended the wooden limbs of Jack Pumpkinhead and made them stronger than before, and the Sawhorse was also inspected to see if he was in good working order. Then, bright and early the next morning, they set out upon the return journey to the Emerald City, the Tin Woodman bearing upon his shoulder a gleaming axe and leading the way, while the Pumpkinhead rode upon the Sawhorse, and Tip and Scarecrow walked upon either side to make sure he didn't fall off or become damaged. Stafford, how is it going? Lori, it's good to see you, boo. Emmanuel Marias, it's good to see you, brother. I hope you're doing well. Adam Jones. So far, so good. We're doing well today. It was a typical Monday. It went all the way up until the end, and kind of had to rush to get set up. But no, I really appreciate you guys being here and hanging out, whether it's background noise or you're enthralled in the story. I know it's a little slow moving, but I have a feeling once they get the gang back together again, then everything is gonna kind of escalate. But it looks like we're gonna go and take the Emerald City back right now. And that to me is a good power move, I'd say. Still here. Watch hours, my friend. Super appreciate that. Watch hours, I'm down to under 900. Got under 900 left to go. Appreciate you. And we're going to get into chapter 12, which is Mr. H.M. Wogglebug, T.E. And remember, the women that took over the Emerald City was led by General Ginger. And I only say that because this is how it starts. Mr. H.M. Wogglebug, T.E. Now, General Ginger, who, you will remember, commanded the army of revolt, was rendered very uneasy by the escape of the Scarecrow from the Emerald City. She feared, and with good reason, that if His Majesty and the Tin Woodman joined forces, it would mean danger to her and her entire army. For the people of Oz had not yet forgotten the deeds of these famous heroes who had passed successfully through so many startling adventures. So Ginger sent post-haste for old Mombi the witch, and promised her large rewards if she would come to the assistance of the rebel army. Oh no. Mombi was furious at the trick Tip had played upon her, as well as his escape and the theft of the precious powder of life. So she needed no urging to induce her to travel to the Emerald City to assist Ginger in defeating the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman, who had made Tip one of their friends. Mombi had no sooner arrived at the royal palace than she discovered, by means of her secret magic, that the adventurers were starting upon their journey to the Emerald City. So she retired to a small room high up in the tower and locked herself in, while she practiced such arts as she would command to prevent the return of the Scarecrow and his companions. That was why the Tin Woodman presently stopped and said, "Something very curious has happened. I ought to know by heart in every step of this journey, yet I fear we have already lost our way." "That is quite impossible," protested the Scarecrow. "Why do you think that, my dear friend? Have we gone astray?" "Why, here before us is a great field of sunflowers, and I never saw this field before in all my life." At these words they all looked around, only to find that they were indeed surrounded by a field of tall stalks, every stalk bearing at its top a gigantic sunflower. And not only were these flowers almost blinding to their vivid hues of red and gold, but each one whirled around upon its stalk like a miniature windmill, completely dazzling the vision of the beholders, and so mystifying them that they knew not which way to turn. "It's witchcraft!" exclaimed Tip. While they paused, hesitating and wondering, the Tin Woodman uttered a cry of impatience and advanced with the swinging axe to cut down the stalks before him. But now the sunflowers suddenly stopped their rapid whirling, and the travelers plainly saw a girl's face appear in the center of each flower. These lovely faces looked upon the astonished band with mocking smiles, and then burst into a chorus of merry laughter at the dismay of their appearance caused. "Stop! Stop!" cried Tip, seizing the woodman's arms. "They're alive! They're girls!" At that moment the flowers began whirling again, and the faces faded away and were lost in the rapid revolutions. And the Tin Woodman dropped his axe and sat down upon the ground. "It would be heartless to chop down those pretty creatures," he said despondently. "And yet I do not know how else we can proceed upon our way. They looked to me strangely like the faces of the army of revolt," mused the Scarecrow, "but I cannot conceive how the girls could have followed us here so quickly." "I believe it's magic," said Tip, positively, "and that someone is playing a trick upon us. I've known old Mombi do things like that before. Probably it's nothing more than an illusion, and there are no sunflowers here at all." "Then let us shut our eyes and walk forward," suggested the Woodman. "Excuse me," replied the Scarecrow. "My eyes are not painted to shut, because you happen to have tin eyelids. You must not imagine we are all built in the same way." "And the eyes of the sawhorse are not eyes," said Jack, leaning forward to examine them. "Nevertheless, you must ride quickly forward," commanded Tip, "and we will follow after you and so try to escape. My eyes are already so dazzled that I can scarcely see." So the Pumpkinhead rolled boldly forward, and Tip grasped the stubbed tail of the sawhorse and followed with closed eyes. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman brought up the rear, and before they'd gone many yards a joyful shout from Jack announced that the way was clear before them. Then all paused to look backward, but not a trace of the field of sunflowers remained. More cheerfully now they proceeded upon their journey, but old Mombi had so changed the appearance of the landscape that they would surely have been lost had not the Scarecrow wisely concluded to take their direction from the sun, for no witchcraft could change the course of the sun, and it was therefore a safe guide. However, other difficulties lay before them. The sawhorse stepped into a rabbit hole and fell to the ground. The Pumpkinhead was pitched high into the air, and his history would probably have ended at that exact moment had not the Tin Woodman skillfully caught the pumpkin as it descended and saved it from injury. Tip soon had it fitted to the neck again and replaced Jack upon his feet, but the sawhorse did not escape so easily, for when his leg was pulled from the rabbit hole it was found to be broken short off. "It must be replaced or repaired before we can go a step further." "This is quite serious," said the Tin Woodman. "If there were trees nearby, I might soon manufacture another leg for this animal, but I cannot see even a shrub for miles around. And there are neither fences nor houses in this part of the land of Oz," added the Scarecrow disconsolately. "Then what shall we do?" inquired the boy. "I suppose I must start my brains working," replied His Majesty the Scarecrow, "for experience has taught me that I can do anything if but take time to think it out." "Let us all think," said Tip, "and perhaps we shall find a way to repair the sawhorse." So they sat in a row upon the grass and began to think, while the sawhorse occupied himself by gazing curiously upon his broken limb. "Does it hurt?" asked the Tin Woodman in a soft, sympathetic voice. "Not in the least," returned the sawhorse, "but my pride is injured to find that my anatomy is so brittle." For a time, the little group remained in silent thought. Presently, the Tin Woodman raised his hand and looked over at the fields. "What sort of creature is that which approaches us?" he asked wonderingly. The others followed his gaze and discovered coming towards them the most extraordinary object they had ever beheld. It advanced quickly and noisily over the soft grass, and in a few minutes stood before the adventurers and regarded them with an astonishment equal to their own. The Scarecrow was calm under all circumstances. "Good morning," he said politely. The stranger removed his hat with a flourish, bowed very low, and then responded, "Good morning, one and all. I hope you are, as an aggregation, enjoying excellent health. Permit me to present my card." With this courteous speech, it extended a card toward the Scarecrow, who accepted it, turned it over and over, and handed it with a shake of his head to Tip. The boy read out loud, "Mr. H.M. Wogglebug, T.E." "Dear me!" ejaculated the Pumpkinhead, staring somewhat intently. "How very peculiar," said the Tin Woodman. Tip's eyes were round and wondering, and the Sawhorse uttered a sigh and turned away its head. "Are you really a Wogglebug?" inquired the Scarecrow. "Most certainly, my dear sir," answered the stranger briskly. "Is not my name upon the card?" "It is," said the Scarecrow. "But may I ask what H.M. stands for?" "H.M. means highly magnified," returned the Wogglebug proudly. "Oh, I see," said the Scarecrow. Viewed the stranger critically. "And are you, in truth, highly magnified?" "Sir," said the Wogglebug, "I take you for a gentleman of judgment and discernment. Does it not occur to you that I am several thousand times greater than any Wogglebug you have ever saw before? Therefore, it is plainly evident that I am highly magnified, and there is no good reason why you should doubt the fact." "Pardon me," returned the Scarecrow. "My brains are slightly mixed since I was last laundered. Would it be improper for me to ask also what the T.E. at the end of your name stands for?" "Those letters express my degree," answered the Wogglebug, with a condescending smile. "To be more explicit, the initials mean that I am thoroughly educated." "Oh," said the Scarecrow, much relieved. Tip had not yet taken his eyes off the wonderful personage. What he saw was a great, round, bug-like body supported upon two slender legs which ended in delicate feet, the toes curling upward. The body of the Wogglebug was rather flat, and judging from what could be seen of it, was of glistening dark brown color upon the back, while the front was stripped with alternate bands of light brown and white, blending together at the edges. Its arms were fully slender, and its legs had, upon a rather long neck, was perched its head. Not unlike the head of a man, except that its nose ended in a curling antenna or feeler, and its ears from the upper points bore antennae that decorated the sides of its head like two miniature curling pigtails. It might be admitted that the round black eyes were rather bulging in appearance, but the expression upon the Wogglebug's face was by no means unpleasant. For dress, the insect wore a dark blue swallowtail coat with a yellow silk lining and a flower in the buttonhole, a vest of white duck that stretched tightly across the wide body, knickerbockers of fawn-colored plush, fastened at the knees with gilt buckles, and perched upon its small head was jauntily set a tall silk hat. Standing upright before our amazed friends, the Wogglebug appeared to be fully as tall as the Tin Woodman, and surely no bug in all the land of Oz had ever attained so enormous a size. "I confess," said the Scarecrow, "that your abrupt appearance has caused me surprise, and no doubt has startled my companions. I hope, however, that this circumstance will not distress you. We shall probably get used to you in time." "Do not apologize, I beg of you," returned the Wogglebug earnestly. "It affords me great pleasure to surprise people, for surely I cannot be classed with ordinary insects, and I'm entitled to both curiosity and admiration from those I meet. You are indeed, agreed His Majesty. If you will permit me to seat myself in your august company, continued the stranger, I will gladly relate my history so that you will be better able to comprehend my unusual, may I say remarkable, appearance? You may say what you please, answered the Tin Woodman briefly. So the Wogglebug sat down upon the grass, facing the little group of wanderers, and told them all the following story. Radio trainer, how's it going? I hope you're doing well, brother. Interesting. Wogglebug. Highly magnified. Wogglebug. Thoroughly educated. I'm just going to refresh my coffee. And I'll be right back, y'all, and we'll get into the next chapter. A highly magnified history. We're going to learn about the Wogglebug. Everyone had a good Monday. I hope you had a good Monday. Highly magnified history. So this is chapter 13. It is but honestly that I should acknowledge at the beginning of my recital that I was born an ordinary Wogglebug, began the creature, in a frank and friendly tone. Knowing no better, I used my arms as well as my legs for walking, and crawled under the edges of stone and hid among the roots of grasses with no thought beyond finding a few insects smaller than myself to feed upon. The chill nights rendered me stiff and motionless, for I wore no clothing. But each morning the warm rays of the sun gave me new life and restored me to activity. A horrible existence is this. But you must remember, it is the regular ordained existence of Wogglebugs, as well as of many other tiny creatures that inhabit the earth. But destiny had singled me out humble though I was, for a grander fate. One day I crawled near to a country schoolhouse, and my curiosity being excited by the monotonous hum of the students within, I made bold to enter and creep along a crack between two boards until I reached the far end, where, in front of a hearth of glowing embers, sat the master at his desk. No one noticed so small a creature as a Wogglebug, and when I found that the hearth was even warmer and more comfortable than the sunshine, I resolved it to establish my future home beside it. So I found a charming nest between two bricks, and hid myself therein for many, many months. Professor Naotal is doubtless the most famous scholar in the land of Oz, and after a few days I began to listen to the lectures and discourses he gave his pupils. Not one of them was more attentive than the humble, unnoticed Wogglebug, and I acquired in this way a fund of knowledge that I will myself confess is simply marvelous. That is why I place T.E., thoroughly educated, upon my cards, for my greatest pride lies in the fact that the world cannot produce another Wogglebug with 1/10 part of my own culture and erudition. I do not blame you, said the Scarecrow. Education is a thing to be proud of. I'm educated myself. The mess of brains given to me by the great wizard is considered by my friends to be unexcelled. Nevertheless, interrupted the Tin Woodman, a good heart is, I believe, much more desirable than education or brains. To me, said the Sawhorse, a good leg is more desirable than either. Could seeds be considered in the light of brains? Inquired the Pumpkinhead abruptly. Keep quiet, commanded Tip sternly. Very well, dear father, answered the obedient Jack. The Wogglebug listened patiently, even respectfully, to those remarks, and then resumed his story. I must have lived fully 3 years in that secluded schoolhouse hearth, he said, drinking thirstily of the ever-flowing fount of limpid knowledge before me. Quite poetical, commented the Scarecrow, nodding his head approvingly. But one day, continued the Bug, a marvelous circumstance occurred that altered my very existence and brought me to my present pinnacle of greatness. The professor discovered me in the act of crawling across the hearth, and before I could escape, he had caught me between his thumb and forefinger. My dear children, he said, I have captured a Wogglebug, a very rare and interesting specimen. Do any of you know what a Wogglebug is? No, yelled the scholars in chorus. Then, said the professor, I will get out my famous magnifying glass and throw the insect upon a screen in a highly magnified condition, that you may all study carefully its particular construction and become acquainted with its habits and manner of life. He then brought from a cupboard a most curious instrument, and before I could realize what had happened, I found myself thrown upon a screen in a highly magnified state, even as you now behold me. The students stood upon their stools and craned their heads forward to get a better view of me. The 2 little girls jumped upon the sill of an open window where they could see more plainly. Behold, cried the professor in a loud voice, this highly magnified Wogglebug, one of the most curious insects in existence. Being thoroughly educated and knowing what is required of a cultured gentleman, at this juncture I stood upright and, placing my hand upon my bosom, made a very polite bow. My action, being unexpected, must have startled them, for one of the little girls perched upon the window-sill gave a scream and fell backward out the window, drawing her companion with her as she disappeared. The professor uttered a cry of horror and rushed away through the door to see if the poor children were injured by the fall. The scholars followed after him in a wild mob, and I was left alone in the schoolroom, still in a highly magnified state, and free to do as I pleased. It immediately occurred to me that this was a good opportunity to escape. I was proud of my great size and realized that now I could safely travel anywhere in the world, while my superior culture would make me a fit associate for the most learned person I might chance to meet. So while the professor picked the little girls who were more frightened than hurt off the ground, and the pupils clustered around him closely grouped, I calmly walked out of the schoolhouse, turned the corner, and escaped unnoticed to a grove of trees that stood near. Wonderful! Exclaimed the Pumpkinhead admiringly. It was indeed, agreed the Wogglebug. I have never ceased to congratulate myself for escaping while I was highly magnified, for even my excessive knowledge would have proved of little use to me if I'd remained a tiny, insignificant insect. I didn't know before, said Tip, looking at the Wogglebug with a puzzled expression, that insects wore clothes. Nor do they, in their natural state, returned the stranger. But in the course of my wanderings, I had the good fortune to save the ninth life of a tailor, tailors having, like cats, 9 lives, as you probably know. The fellow was exceedingly grateful, for had he lost that 9th life, it would have been the end of him. So he begged permission to furnish me with the stylish costume I now wear. It fits very nicely, does it not? And the Wogglebug stood up and turned himself around slowly, that all might examine his person. He must have been a good tailor, said the Scarecrow, somewhat envious. He was a good-hearted tailor, at any rate, observed Nick Chopper. But where were you going when you met us? Tip asked the Wogglebug. Nowhere in particular, was the reply. although it is my intention soon to visit the Emerald City. I arranged to give a course of lectures to select audiences on the advantages of magnification. We are bound for the Emerald City now, said the Tin Woodman, so if it pleases you to do so, you are welcome to travel in our company. The Wogglebug bowed with profound grace. It will give me great pleasure, said he, to accept your kind invitation, for nowhere in the land of Oz could I hope to meet with so congenial a company. That is true, acknowledged the Pumpkinhead. We are quite congenial as flies and honey. But, pardon me if I seem inquisitive, are you not all rather unusual? Asked the Wogglebug, looking from one to another with unconcealed interest. Not more so than yourself, answered the Scarecrow. Everything in life is unusual until you get accustomed to it. What rare philosophy, exclaimed the Wogglebug admiringly. Yes, my brains are working well today, admitted the Scarecrow, an accent of pride in his voice. Then, if you are sufficiently rested and refreshed, let us bend our steps toward the Emerald City, suggested the Magnified One. We can't, said Tip. The Sawhorse has a broken leg, so he can't bend his steps. And there's no wood around to make him a new limb. And we can't leave the horse behind because the Pumpkinhead is so stiff in his joints that he has to ride. How very unfortunate, cried the Wogglebug. Then he looked the party over carefully and said, If the Pumpkinhead is to ride, why not use one of his legs to make a leg for the horse that carries him? I judge that both are made of wood. Now that is what I call real cleverness, said the Scarecrow approvingly. I wonder my brains did not think of that long ago. Get to work, my dear Nick, and fit the Pumpkinhead's leg to the Sawhorse. Jack was not especially pleased with this idea, but he submitted to having his left leg amputated by the Tin Woodman, and whittled down to fit the left leg of the Sawhorse. Nor was the Sawhorse especially pleased with the operation either, for he growled a good deal about being butchered, as he called it, and afterward declared that the new leg was a disgrace to a respectable Sawhorse. I beg you to be more careful in your speech, said the Pumpkinhead sharply. Remember, if you please, that it is my leg you are abusing. I cannot forget it, retorted the Sawhorse, for it is quite as flimsy as the rest of your person. Flimsy? Me, flimsy? Cried Jack, in a rage. How dare you call me flimsy? Because you are built as absurdly as a jumping jack, sneered the horse, rolling his naughty eyes in a vicious manner. Even your head won't stay straight, and you never can tell whether you are looking backwards or forwards. Friends, I entreat you not to quarrel, pleaded the Tin Woodman anxiously. As a matter of fact, we are none of us above criticism, so let us bear with each other's faults. An excellent suggestion, said the Wogglebug approvingly. You must have an excellent heart, my metallic friend. I have, returned Nick, well pleased. My heart is quite the best part of me, but now let us start upon our journey. They perched the one-legged Pumpkinhead upon the Sawhorse, and tied him to a seat with cords so that he could not possibly fall off. And then, following the lead of the Scarecrow, they all advanced in the direction of the Emerald City. What a great idea, and we have a new companion, the Wogglebug. That's always cool. Chapter 14, we're going to get into Old Mombi indulges in witchcraft. They soon discovered that the Sawhorse limped, for his new leg was a trifle too long. So they were obliged to halt while the Tin Woodman chopped it down with his axe, after which the wooden steed paced along more comfortably, but the Sawhorse was not entirely satisfied even yet. It was a shame that I broke my other leg, it growled. On the contrary, airily remarked the Wogglebug, who was walking alongside. You should consider the accident most fortunate, for a horse is never much use until he has been broken. I beg your pardon, said Tip, rather provoked, for he felt a warm interest in both the Sawhorse and his man Jack. But permit me to say that your joke is a poor one, and as old as it is poor. Still, it is a joke, declared the Wogglebug firmly, and a joke derived from a play upon words is considered among educated people to be admittedly proper. What does that mean? Inquired Pumpkinhead stupidly. It means, my dear friend, explained the Wogglebug, that our language contains many words having a double meaning, and that to pronounce a joke that allows both meaning of a certain word proves the joker a person of culture and refinement, who has, moreover, a thorough command of the language. I don't believe that, said Tip plainly. Anybody can make a pun. Not so, rejoined the Wogglebug stiffly. It requires education of a high order. Are you educated, young sir? Not especially, admitted Tip. Then you cannot judge the matter. I myself am thoroughly educated, and I say that puns display genius. For instance, were I to ride upon the sawhorse, he would not only be an animal, he would become an equipage, for he would be a horse and a buggy. At this, the Scarecrow gave a gasp, and the Tin Woodman stopped short and looked reproachfully at the Wogglebug. At the same time, the Sawhorse loudly snorted his derision, and even the Pumpkinhead put up his hand to hide the smile which, because it was carved upon his face, he could not change into a frown. But the Wogglebug strutted along as if he made some brilliant remark, and the Scarecrow was obliged to say, I have heard, my dear friend, that a person can become over-educated, and although I have a high respect for brains, no matter how they may be arranged or classified, I begin to suspect that yours are slightly tangled. In any event, I must beg you to restrain your superior education while in our society. We are not very particular, added the Tin Woodman, and we are exceedingly kind-hearted, but if your superior culture gets leaky again— He did not complete the sentence, but he twirled his gleaming axe so carelessly that the Wogglebug looked frightened and shrank away to the safe distance. The others marched on in his silence, and the highly magnified one, after a period of deep thought, said in a humble voice, I will endeavor to restrain myself. That is all we can expect, returned the Scarecrow pleasantly, and good nature being thus happily restored to the party, they proceeded upon their way. When they again stopped to allow Tip to rest, the boy being the only one that seemed to tire, the Tin Woodman noticed many small round holes in a grassy meadow. This must be the village of the field mice, he said to the Scarecrow. I wonder if my old friend, the Queen of the Mice, is in this neighborhood. If she is, she may be of great service to us, answered the Scarecrow, who was impressed by a sudden thought. See if you can call her, my dear Nick. So the Tin Woodman blew a shrill note upon a silver whistle that hung around his neck, and presently a tiny gray mouse popped from a nearby hole and advanced fearlessly toward them, for the Tin Woodman had once saved her life, and the Queen of the Field Mice knew he was to be trusted. Good day, your Majesty, said Nick, politely addressing the mouse. I trust you are enjoying good health. Thank you, I am quite well, answered the Queen demurely, as she sat up and displayed a tiny golden crown upon her head. Can I do anything to assist my old friends? You can indeed, replied the Scarecrow eagerly. Let me, I entreat you, take a dozen of your subjects with me to the Emerald City. Will they be injured in any way? Asked the Queen doubtfully. I think not, replied the Scarecrow. I will carry them hidden in the straw which stuffs my body, and when I give them the signal by unbuttoning my jacket, they will only have to rush out and scamper home again as fast as they can. By doing this, they will assist me to regain my throne, which the army of revolt has taken from me. In that case, said the Queen, I will not refuse your request. Whenever you are ready, I will call 12 of my most intelligent subjects. I am ready now, returned the Scarecrow. Then he lay flat upon the ground and unbuttoned his jacket, displaying a mass of straw with which he was stuffed. The Queen uttered a little piping call, and in an instant a dozen pretty field mice had emerged from their holes and stood before their ruler, awaiting their orders. What the Queen said to them, none of our travelers could understand, for it was in the mouse language, but the field mice obeyed without hesitation, running one after another to the Scarecrow and hiding themselves in the straw of his breast. When all of the 12 mice had thus concealed himself, the Scarecrow buttoned his jacket securely, and then arose and thanked the Queen for her kindness. One thing more you might do to serve us, suggested the Tin Woodman, and that is to run ahead of us and show us the way to the Emerald City, for some enemy is evidently trying to prevent us from reaching it." "I will do that gladly," returned the queen. "Are you ready?" The Tin Woodman looked at Tip. "I'm rested," said the boy. "Let us start." Then they resumed their journey, the little gray queen of the field mice running swiftly ahead, and then pausing until the travelers drew near, when away she would dart again. Without this unerring guide, the Scarecrow and his comrades might never have gained the Emerald City, for many were the obstacles thrown in their way by the arts of the old Mombi. Yet not one of the obstacles really existed. They were all cleverly contrived deceptions. For when they came to the banks of a rushing river that threatened to bar their way, the little queen kept steadily on, passing through the seeming flood of safety, and our travelers followed her without encountering a single drop of water. Again, a high wall of granite towered high above their heads and opposed their advance. But the gray field mouse walked straight through it, and the others did the same, the wall melting into mist as they passed it. Afterward, when they had stopped for a moment to allow Tip to rest, they saw 40 roads branching off from their feet in 40 different directions, and soon these 40 roads began whirling around like a mighty wheel, first in one direction, then in the other, completely bewildering their vision. But the queen called for them to follow her and darted off in a straight line, and when they had gone a few paces, the whirling pathways vanished and were seen no more. Mombi's last trick was the most fearful of all. She sent a sheet of crackling flame rushing over the meadow to consume them, and for the first time the Scarecrow became afraid and turned to fly. "If that fire reaches me, I will be gone in no time," he said, trembling until his straw rattled. "It's the most dangerous thing I ever encountered." "I'm off too," cried the Sawhorse, turning and prancing with agitation, "for my wood is so dry it would burn like kindlings." Is fire dangerous to pumpkins?" asked Jack fearfully. "You'll be baked like a tart, and so will I," answered the Wogglebug, getting down on all fours so he could run the faster. But the Tin Woodman, having no fear of fire, averted the stampede by a few sensible words. "Look at the field mouse," he shouted. "The fire does not burn her in the least. In fact, it is not fire at all, but only a deception." Indeed, to watch the little queen calmly through the advancing flames restored courage to every member of the party, and they followed her without being even scorched. "This is surely the most extraordinary adventure," said the Wogglebug, who was greatly amazed. "For it upsets all the natural laws that I heard Professor Nawatal teach at the schoolhouse." "Of course it does," said the Scarecrow wisely. "All magic is unnatural, and for that reason it is to be feared and avoided. But I see before us the gates of the Emerald City, so I imagine we have now overcome all the magical obstacles that seem to oppose us." Indeed, the walls of the city were plainly visible, and the Queen of the Field Mice, who had guided them so faithfully, came near to bid them goodbye. "We are very grateful to your Majesty for your kind assistance," said the Tin Woodman, bowing before the pretty creature. "I am always pleased to be of service to my friends," answered the Queen, and in a flash she had darted away upon her journey home. Good old field mice helping them out. Chapter 14. The Prisoners of the Queen. That's the one I think they're going to have trouble with, is the queen. Approaching the gateway of the Emerald City, the travelers found it guarded by 2 girls of the Army of Revolt, who opposed their entrance by drawing the knitting needles from their hair and threatening to prod the first that came near. But the Tin Woodman was not afraid. "At the worst, they can but scratch my beautiful nickel plate," he said. "But there will be no worst, for I think I can manage to frighten these absurd soldiers very easily. Follow me closely, all of you." Then, swinging his axe in a great circle to the right and left before him, he advanced upon the gate, and the others followed him without hesitation. The girls, who had expected no resistance whatsoever, were terrified by the sweep of the glittering axe and fled screaming into the city, so that our travelers passed the gates in safety and marched down the green marble pavement of the wide street towards the royal palace. "At this rate, we will soon have your majesty upon the throne again," said the Tin Woodman, laughing at his easy conquest of the guards. "Thank you, friend Nick," returned the Scarecrow gratefully. "Nothing can resist your kind heart and your sharp axe." As they passed the rows of houses, they saw through the open doors that men were sweeping and dusting and washing dishes, while the women sat around in groups gossiping and laughing. "What has happened?" the Scarecrow asked a sad-looking man with a bushy beard who wore an apron and was wheeling a baby carriage along the sidewalk. "Why, we've had a revolution, your majesty, as you ought to know very well," replied the man. "And since you went away, the women have been running things to suit themselves. I'm glad you have decided to come back and restore order, for doing housework and minding the children is wearing on the strength of every man in the Emerald City." Cried the Scarecrow, thoughtfully. "If it is such hard work as you say, how did the women manage to do it so easily?" "I really do not know," replied the man with a deep sigh. "Perhaps the women are made of castrian?" No movement was made as they passed along the street. To oppose their progress, several of the women stopped their gossip long enough to cast curious looks upon their friends. But immediately, they would turn away with a laugh or a sneer and resume their chatter. And when they met with several girls belonging to the Army of Revolt, these soldiers, instead of being alarmed or appearing surprised, merely stepped out of the way and allowed them to advance without protest. This action rendered the Scarecrow uneasy. "I'm afraid we're walking into a trap," he said. "Nonsense," returned Nick Chopper confidently. "The silly creatures are conquered already." But the Scarecrow shook his head in a way that expressed doubt, and Tip said, "It's too easy altogether. Look out for trouble ahead." "I will," returned His Majesty. Unopposed, they reached the royal palace and marched up the marble steps, which had once been thickly crusted with emeralds, were now just filled with tiny holes where the jewels had been ruthlessly torn from their settings by the Army of Revolt. And so far, not a rebel barred their way. Through the arched hallways and into the magnificent throne room marched the Tin Woodman and his followers, and here, when the green silken curtains fell behind them, they saw a curious sight. Seated within the glittering throne was General Ginger, with the Scarecrow's second-best crown upon her head, and the royal scepter in her right hand. A box of caramels, from which she was eating, rested in her lap, and the girl seemed entirely at ease in her royal surroundings. The Scarecrow stepped forward and confronted her, while the Tin Woodman leaned upon his axe and the others formed a half-circle back of His Majesty's person. "How dare you sit in my throne?" demanded the Scarecrow, sternly eyeing the intruder. "Don't you know you're guilty of treason, and that there is law against treason?" "The throne belongs to whoever is able to take it," answered Ginger, as she slowly ate another caramel. "I have taken it, as you can see, so just now I am the queen, and all who oppose me are guilty of treason, and must be punished by law you have just mentioned." This view of the case puzzled the Scarecrow. "How is it, friend Nick?" he asked, turning to the Tin Woodman. "Why, when it comes to law, I have nothing to say," answered that personage. "For laws were never meant to be understood, and it is foolish to make an attempt." "Then what shall we do?" asked the Scarecrow in dismay. "Why don't you marry the queen? Then you can both rule," suggested the Wogglebug. Ginger glared at the insect fiercely. "Why don't you send her back to her mother where she belongs?" asked Pumpkinhead. Ginger frowned. "Why don't you shut her up in a closet until she behaves herself and promises to be good?" inquired Tip. Ginger's lip curled scornfully. "Or give her a good shaking," added the Sawhorse. "No," said the Tin Woodman. "We must treat the poor girl with gentleness. Let us give her all the jewels she can carry and send her away happy and contented." At this, Queen Ginger laughed out loud, and the next minute clapped her pretty hands together thrice, as if for a signal. "You are very absurd creatures," said she. "But I am tired of your nonsense, and have no time to bother with you longer." While the monarch and his friends listened in amazement to this impudent speech, a startling thing happened. The Tin Woodman's axe was snatched from his grasp by some person behind him, and he found himself disarmed and helpless. At the same instant, a shout of laughter rang in the ears of the devoted band, and turning to see whence this came, they found themselves surrounded by the army of revolt, the girls bearing in either hand their glistening knitting needles. The entire throne room seemed to be filled with the rebels, and the Scarecrow and his comrades realized that they were the prisoners. "You see how foolish it is to oppose a woman's wit," said Ginger gaily. "And this event only proves that I am more fit to rule the Emerald City than the Scarecrow. I bear you no ill will, I assure you, but lest you should prove troublesome to me in the future, I shall order you all to be destroyed. That is, all except the boy who belongs to old Mombi, and must be restored to her keeping. The rest of you are not human, and therefore will not be wicked to demolish you. The Sawhorse and the Pumpkinhead's bodies will have chopped up for kindling wood, and the pumpkin shall be made into tarts. The Scarecrow will do nicely to start a bonfire, and the Tin Men can be cut into smaller pieces and fed to the goats. As for the immense Wogglebug, highly magnified if you please," interrupted the insect, "I think I will ask the cook to make green turtle soup of you," continued the Queen reflectively. The Wogglebug shuddered. "Or, if that won't do, we might use you for a Hungarian goulash, stewed and highly spiced," she added cruelly. This program of extermination was so terrible that the prisoners looked upon one another in panic of fear. The Scarecrow alone did not give way to despair. He stood quietly before the Queen, and his brow was wrinkled in deep thought as he strove to find some means of escape. While thus engaged, he felt the straw within his breast move slightly. At once his expression changed from sadness to joy, and raising his hand, he quickly unbuttoned the front of his jacket. This action did not pass unnoticed by the crowd of girls cluttering around him, but none of them suspected what he was doing until a tiny gray mouse leapt from his bosom to the floor and scampered away between the feet of the army of revolt. Another mouse quickly followed, and another, in rapid succession. And suddenly, such a scream of terror went up from the army that it might easily have filled the stoutest heart with consternation. I am learning words, or they're misspelling them. The flight that ensued turned to stampede, and the stampede to a panic. For while the startled mice rushed wildly about the room, the Scarecrow had only time to note a whirl of skirts and a twinkling of feet as the girls disappeared from the palace, pushing and crowding one another in their mad efforts to escape. The Queen, at the first alarm, stood upon the cushions of the throne and began to dance frantically upon her tiptoes. Then a mouse ran up the cushions, and with a terrified leap, poor Ginger shot clear over the head of the Scarecrow and escaped through the archway, never pausing in her wild career, until she had reached the city gates. So in less time than I can explain, the throne room was deserted by all save the Scarecrow and his friends, and the Wogglebug heaved a deep sigh of relief as he exclaimed, "Thank goodness we are saved." "For a time, yes," answered the Tin Woodman, "but the army will soon return, I fear." "Let us bar all the entrances to the palace," said the Scarecrow. "Then we shall have time to think what best to be done." So all except Jack Pumpkinhead, who was still tied fast to the Sawhorse, ran to the various entrances of the royal palace and closed the heavy doors, bolting and locking them securely. Then, knowing that the army of revolt could not batter down the barriers in several days, the adventurers gathered once more in the throne room for a council of war. Alan Duncan, morning, Kev. What's up, Alan? What's up, Boyd? What's up? What's up, CBC? I hope you're doing well, good. Project from the back, man. I love this part of the book. I'm trying, man. I really am. Appreciate you being here, Boyd. The Scarecrow takes time to think. It seems to me, began the Scarecrow, when we were all assembled in the throne room, that the girl Ginger is quite right in claiming to be queen. And if she's right, then I am wrong, and we have no business to be occupying her palace. But you were the king until she came, said the Wogglebug, strutting up and down with his hands in his pockets. So it appears to me that she is the interloper instead of you, especially as we have just conjured her and put her into flight, added the Pumpkinhead, as he raised his hands to turn his face toward the Scarecrow. Have we really conquered her? Asked the Scarecrow quietly. Look out of the window and tell me what you see. Tip ran to the window and looked out. The palace is surrounded by a double row of girl soldiers, he announced. I thought so, returned the Scarecrow. We are as truly their prisoners as we were before. The mice frightened them from the palace. My friend is right, said Nick Chopper, who had been polishing his breast with a bit of Camosis leather. Ginger is still the queen, and we are her prisoners. But I hope she cannot get at us, exclaimed the Pumpkinhead with a shiver of fear. She threatened to make tarts of me, you know. Don't worry, said the Tin Woodman. It cannot matter greatly. If you stay shut up in here, you will spoil in time. Anyway, a good tart is far more admirable than a decayed intellect. Very true, agreed the Scarecrow. Oh dear, moaned Jack. What an unhappy lot is mine. Why, dear father, did you not make me out of tin, or even out of straw, so that I could keep indefinitely? Shucks, returned Tip indignantly. You ought to be glad I made you at all. Then he added reflectively, everything has to come to an end sometime. But I beg to remind you, broke in the Wogglebug, who had a distressed look in his bulging round eyes, that this terrible Queen Ginger suggested making goulash out of me. Me! The only highly magnified and thoroughly educated Wogglebug in a wide, wide world. I think it was a brilliant idea, remarked the Scarecrow approvingly. Don't you imagine he would make a better soup? Asked the Tin Woodman, turning to his friend. Well, perhaps, acknowledged the Scarecrow. The Wogglebug groaned. I can see in my mind's eye, said he, mournfully, the goats eating small pieces of my dear comrade, the Tin Woodman, while my soup is being cooked on a bonfire built of the sawhorse and Jack Pumpkinhead's body, and Queen Ginger watches me boil while she feeds the flames with my friend the Scarecrow. This morbid picture cast a gloom over the entire party, making them restless and anxious. It can't happen for some time, said the Tin Woodman, trying to speak cheerfully, for we shall be able to keep Ginger out of the palace until she manages to break down the doors. And in the meantime, I am liable to starve to death, and so is the Wogglebug, announced Tip. As for me, said the Wogglebug, I think that I could live for some time on Jack Pumpkinhead. Not that I prefer pumpkins for food, but I believe that they are somewhat nutritious, and Jack's head is large and plump. How heartless! Exclaimed the Tin Woodman, greatly shocked. Are we cannibals, let me ask, or are we faithful friends? I see very clearly that we cannot stay shut up in this palace, said the Scarecrow with decision. So let us end this mournful talk and try to discover a means of escape. At this suggestion, they all gathered eagerly around the throne, wherein was seated the Scarecrow, and as Tip sat down upon a stool there fell from his pocket a pepper box which rolled upon the floor. "What is this?" asked Nick Chopper, picking up the box. "Be careful!" cried the boy. "That's my powder of life. Don't spill it, for it's nearly gone." "And what is the powder of life?" inquired the Scarecrow as Tip replaced the box carefully in his pocket. "It's some magical stuff old Mombi got from a crooked sorcerer," explained the boy. "She brought Jack to life with it, and afterward I used it to bring the sawhorse to life. I guess it will make anything live that is sprinkled over it, but there's only about 1 dose left." "Then it is very precious," said the Tin Woodman. "Indeed it is," agreed the Scarecrow. "It may prove our best means of escape from our difficulties. I believe I will think for a few minutes. So I will thank you, friend Tip, to get out your knife and rip this heavy crown from my forehead." Tip soon cut the stitches that fastened the crown to the Scarecrow's head, and the former monarch of Emerald City removed it with a sigh of relief and hung it on a peg beside the throne. "That is my last memento of royalty," he said, "and I'm glad to get rid of it. The former king of this city, who was named Pastoria, lost the crown to a wonderful wizard who passed it on to me. Now the girl Ginger claims it, and I sincerely hope it will not give her a headache." "A kindly thought, which I greatly admire," said the Tin Woodman, nodding approvingly. "And now I will indulge in a quiet think," continued the Scarecrow, lying back in his throne. The others remained as silent and still as possible as to not disturb him, for all had great confidence in the extraordinary brains of the Scarecrow. And after what seemed a very long time indeed to the anxious watchers, the thinker sat up, looked upon his friends with the most whimsical expression, and said, "My brains worked beautifully today. I'm quite proud of them. Now listen. If we attempt to escape through the doors of the palace, we shall surely be captured. And as we can't escape through the ground, there is only one other thing that can be done. We must escape through the air." He paused to note the effect of these words, but all his hearers seemed puzzled and unconvinced. "The wonderful wizard escaped in a balloon," he continued. "We don't know how to make a balloon, of course, but any sort of thing that can fly through the air can carry us easily. So I suggest that my friend the Tin Woodman, who is a skillful mechanic, shall build some sort of machine with good strong wings to carry us, and our friend Tip can then bring the thing to life with his magical powder." "Bravo!" cried Nick Chopper. "What splendid brains!" murmured Jack. "Really quite clever," said the educated Wogglebug. "I believe it can be done," declared Tip. "That is, if the Tin Woodman is equal to making the thing." "I'll do my best," said Nick cheerfully, "and, as a matter of fact, I do not often fail in what I attempt. But the thing will have to be built on the roof of the palace so it can rise comfortably into the air." "To be sure," said the Scarecrow. "Then let us search through the palace," continued the Tin Woodman, "and carry all the material we can find to the roof where I can begin my work. First, however," said the Pumpkinhead, "I beg you release me from this horse, and make me another leg to walk with, for in my present condition I am of no use to myself or anyone else." So the Tin Woodman knocked the mahogany center table into pieces with his axe and fit one of the legs, which was beautifully carved, onto the body of Jack Pumpkinhead, who was very proud of the acquisition. "It seems strange," said he, as he watched the Tin Woodman work, "that my left leg should be the most elegant and substantial part of me." "That proves you are unusual," returned the Scarecrow, "and I am convinced that the only people worthy of consideration in this world are the unusual ones, for the common folk are like the leaves of a tree, and live and die unnoticed." "Spoken like a philosopher," cried the Wogglebug, as he assisted the Tin Woodman to set Jack upon his feet. "How do you feel now?" asked Tip, watching the Pumpkinhead stump around and try his new leg. "As good as new," answered Jack, joyfully, "and quite ready to assist you all to escape." "Then let us get to work," said the Scarecrow in a businesslike tone. So, glad to be doing anything that might lead to the end of their captivity, the friends separated to wander over the palace in search of fitting material to use in the construction of their aerial machine. Indubitably. You're not wrong. You're not wrong, boy. I think the one that really stood out to me in this chapter here was the I am convinced that only people worthy of consideration in this world are the unusual ones, for the common folks are like the leaves of a tree and live and die unnoticed. I think that one got me. Well, we're going to move into the next chapter, The Astonishing Flight of the Gump. And I think we're about to meet a new friend. When the adventurers reassembled upon the roof, it was found that a remarkably queer assortment of articles had been selected by the various members of the party. No one seemed to have a very clear idea of what was required, but all had brought something. The Wogglebug had taken from his position over the mantelpiece in the great hallway the head of a gump, which was adorned with a wide spreading antlers, and this, with great care and greater difficulty, the insect had carried up the stairs to the roof. This gump resembled an elk's head, only the nose turned upward in a saucy manner, and there were whiskers upon its chin, like those of a billy goat. Why the Wogglebug selected this article he could not have explained, except that it had aroused his curiosity. Tip, with the aid of the sawhorse, had brought a large upholstered sofa to the roof. It was an old-fashioned piece of furniture with a high back and ends, and it was so heavy that even by resting the greatest weight upon the back of the sawhorse, the boy found himself out of breath, when at last the clumsy sofa was dumped upon the roof. The Pumpkinhead had brought a broom, which was the first thing he saw. The Scarecrow arrived with a coil of clothesline and ropes which he had taken from the courtyard, and in his trip up the stairs he had become so entangled in the loose ends of the rope that both he and his burden tumbled into a heap upon the roof, and might have rolled off had Tip not rescued him. The Tin Woodman appeared last. He also had been in the courtyard, where he had cut 4 great spreading leaves from a huge palm tree that was the pride of all the inhabitants of the Emerald City. "My dear Nick," exclaimed Scarecrow, seeing what his friend had done, "you have been guilty of the greatest crime any person can commit in Emerald City. If I remember rightly, the penalty for chopping leaves from the royal palm trees is to be killed 7 times and afterward imprisoned for life." "It cannot be helped now," answered the Tin Woodman, throwing down the big leaves upon the roof. "But it may be one more reason why it is necessary for us to escape. And now, let us see what you have found me to work with." Many were the doubtful looks cast upon the heap of miscellaneous material that now cluttered the roof, and finally the Scarecrow shook his head and remarked, "Well, if friend Nick can manufacture from this mess of rubbish a thing that will fly through the air and carry us to safety, then I will acknowledge him to be a better mechanic than I expected." But the Tin Woodman seemed at first by no means sure of his powers, and only after polishing his forehead vigorously with the camomise oil leather did he resolve to undertake the task. "The first thing required for a machine," he said, "is a body big enough to carry the entire party. The sofa is the biggest thing we have, and might be used for a body, but should the machine ever tip sideways, we will all slide off and fall to the ground." "Why not use 2 sofas?" asked Tip. "There's another one just like it downstairs." "That's a very sensible suggestion," exclaimed the Tin Woodman. "You must fetch the other sofa at once." So Tip and the Sawhorse managed, with much labor, to get the second sofa to the roof, and when the 2 were placed together, edge to edge, the backs and ends formed a protecting rampart all around the seats. "Excellent!" cried the Scarecrow. "We can ride within this snug nest quite at our ease." The 2 sofas were now bound firmly together with ropes and clotheslines, and then Nick Chopper fastened the Gump's head to one end. "That will show which is the front end of the thing," he said, greatly pleased with the idea. "And, really, if you examine it critically, the Gump looks very well as a figurehead." These great palm leaves, for which I have endangered my life 7 times, must serve us as wings." "Are they strong enough?" asked the boy. "They are strong as anything we can get," answered the woodman. "And although they are not in proportion to the thing's body, we are not in a position to be very particular." So he fastened the palm leaves to the sofas, 2 on each side. Said the Wogglebug, with considerable admiration. "The thing is now complete, and only needs to be brought to life." "Stop a moment," exclaimed Jack. "Are you not going to use my broom?" "What for?" asked the Scarecrow. "Why, it can be fastened to the back end for a tail," answered the Pumpkinhead. "Surely you would not call a thing complete without a tail." Cried the Tin Woodman. "I do not see the use of a tail. We are not trying to copy a beast or a fish or a bird. All we ask of the thing is to carry us through the air." "Perhaps after the thing is brought to life, it can use a tail to steer with," suggested the Scarecrow. "For if it flies through the air, it will not be unlike a bird, and I've noticed that all birds have tails, which they use for a rudder while flying." "Very well," answered Nick. "The broom shall be used for a tail." And he fastened it firmly to the back end of the sofa body. Tip took the pepper box from his pocket. "The thing looks very big," he said anxiously, "and I'm not sure there's enough powder left to bring all of it to life. But I'll make it go as far as possible." "Put most on its wings," said Nick Chopper, "for they must be made as strong as possible. And don't forget the head," exclaimed the old Wogglebug. "Or the tail," added Jack Pumpkinhead. "Do be quiet," said Tip nervously. "You must give me a chance to work the magic charm in the proper manner." Very carefully he began sprinkling those things with the precious powder. Each of the 4 wings was first lightly covered with a layer, and then the sofas were sprinkled and the broom given the last coating. "The head! The head! Don't, I beg of you, forget the head!" cried the Wogglebug excitedly. "There's only a little of the powder left," announced Tip, looking within the box, "and it seems to me it is more important to bring the legs of the sofas to life than the head." "Not so," decided the Scarecrow. "Everything must have a head to direct it, and since this creature is to fly and not walk, it is really unimportant whether its legs are alive or not." So Tip abided by this decision and sprinkled the Gump's head with the remainder of the powder. "Now," he said, "keep silent while I work the charm." Having heard old Mombi pronounce the magic words, and having also succeeded in bringing the sawhorse to life, Tip did not hesitate an instant in speaking the 3 Kabbalistic words, each accompanied by the particular gesture of his hands. It was a grave and unimpressive ceremony. As he finished the incantation, the thing shuddered throughout its huge bulk. The Gump gave a screeching cry that is familiar to those animals, and then the 4 wings began flopping furiously. Tip managed to grasp a chimney, else he would have been blown off the roof by the terrible breeze raised by the wings. The Scarecrow, being light in weight, was caught up bodily and borne through the air until Tip luckily seized him by one leg and held him fast. The Wogglebug lay flat upon the roof and so escaped harm, and the Tin Woodman, whose weight of the tin anchored him firmly, threw both arms around Jack Pumpkinhead and managed to save him. The sawhorse toppled over upon his back and lay with his legs waving helplessly above him. And now, while all were struggling to recover themselves, the thing rose slowly from the roof and mounted into the air. "Here, come back!" cried Tip in a frightened voice, as he clung to the chimney with one hand and the Scarecrow with the other. "Come back at once, I command you!" It was now that the wisdom of the Scarecrow, in bringing the head of the thing to life instead of the legs, was proved beyond a doubt, for the Gump, already high in the air, turned his head at Tip's command and gradually circled around until it could view the roof of the palace. "Come back!" shouted the boy again, and the Gump obeyed, slowly and gracefully waving its 4 wings in the air until the thing had settled once more upon the roof and became still. Yeah, what's up, Ambino? How are you doing, man? Gangistan, it's good to see you. It is good to see you. No, it's been a minute. Indeed. Let's see, 35 minutes here. Let's see what this is. Cool. Alright. Getting into the last couple of chapters here. We're going to be going in the jackdaw's nest. "This," said the gump, in a squeaky voice not at all proportioned to the size of its great body, "is the most novel experience I've ever heard of. The last thing I remember distinctly is walking through the forest and hearing a loud noise. Something probably killed me then, and it certainly ought to have been the end of me. Yet here I am, alive again, with 4 monstrous wings and a body which I venture to say would make any respectable animal or fowl weep with shame to own. What does it all mean? Am I a gump, or am I a juggernaut?" This creature, as it spoke, wiggled its chin whiskers in a very comical manner. "You're just a thing," answered Tip, "with a gump's head on it, and we have made you and brought you to life that you may carry us through the air wherever we wish to go." "Very good," said the thing. "As I am not a gump, I cannot have a gump's pride or independent spirit, so I may as well become your servant as anything else. My only satisfaction is that I do not seem to have a very strong constitution, and I am not likely to live long in a state of slavery." "Don't say that, I beg of you," cried the Tin Woodman, whose excellent heart was strongly affected by this sad speech. "Are you not feeling well today?" "Oh, as for that," returned the gump, "it is my first day of existence, so I cannot judge whether I am feeling well or ill." And it waved its broom tail to and fro in a pensive manner. Come," said the Scarecrow kindly. "Do try to be more cheerful, and take life as you find it. We shall be kind masters, and will strive to render your existence as pleasurable as possible. Are you willing to carry us through the air wherever we wish to go?" "Certainly," answered the gump. "I greatly prefer to navigate the air, for I should travel on the earth and meet with one of my own species. My embarrassment would become something awful." "I can appreciate that," said the Tin Woodman sympathetically. "And yet," continued the thing, "when I carefully look over you, my masters, none of you seem to be constructed much more artistically than I am." "Appearances are deceitful," said the Wogglebug earnestly. "I am both highly magnified and thoroughly educated." "Indeed," murmured the gump indifferently. "And my brains are considered remarkably rare specimens," added the Scarecrow proudly. "How strange," remarked the gump. "Although I am of tin," said the Woodman, "I own a heart altogether the warmest and most admirable in the whole world." "I am delighted to hear it," replied the gump, with a silent cough. "My smile," said Jack Pumpkinhead, "is worthy your best attention, and is always the same." "Semper Ideum," replied the Wogglebug pompously, and the gump turned to stare at him. "And I," declared the Sawhorse, filling in the awkward pause, "am only remarkable because I can't help it." "I am proud indeed to meet with such exceptional masters," said the gump, in a careless tone. "If I could but secure so complete an introduction to myself, I would be more than satisfied." "That will come in time," remarked the Scarecrow. "To know thyself is considered quite an accomplishment, which it has taken us, who are your elders, months to perfect. But now," he added, turning to the others, "let us get aboard and start upon our journey." "Where shall we go?" asked Tip, as he clambered onto the seat on the sofas and assisted the Pumpkinhead to follow him. "In the South Country rules a very delightful queen called Glinda the Good, who I am sure will gladly receive us," said the Scarecrow, getting into the thing clumsily. "Let us go to her and ask her advice." "That is cleverly thought of," declared Nick Chopper, giving the Wogglebug a boost and then toppling the Sawhorse into the rear end of the cushion seats. "I know Glinda the Good, and believe she will prove a friend indeed." "Are we all ready?" asked the boy. "Yes," announced the Tin Woodman, seating himself beside the Scarecrow. "Then," said Tip, addressing the Gump, "be kind enough to fly us to the southward, and do not go higher than to escape the houses and trees, for it makes me dizzy to be up so far." "All right," answered the Gump briefly, flopped its 4 wings and rose slowly into the air, and then, while our little band of adventurers clung to the backs and sides of the sofas for support, the Gump turned toward the south and soared swiftly and majestically away. "The scenic effect from this altitude is marvelous," commented the educated Wogglebug as they rode along. "Never mind the scenery," said the Scarecrow. "Hold on tight, or you may get a tumble. The thing seems to rock badly." "It will be dark soon," said Tip, observing that the sun was low on the horizon. "Perhaps we should have waited until morning. I wonder if the Gump can fly at night." "I've been wondering that myself," returned the Gump quietly. "You see, this is a new experience for me. I used to have legs that carried me swiftly over the ground, but now my legs feel as if they're asleep." "They are," said Tip. "We didn't bring them to life." "You are expected to fly," exclaimed the Scarecrow, "not to walk." "We can walk ourselves," said the Wogglebug. "I begin to understand what is required of me," remarked the Gump. "So I will do my best to please you." And he flew on for a time in silence. Presently, Jack Pumpkinhead became uneasy. "I wonder if riding through the air is liable to spoil pumpkins," he said. "Not unless you carelessly drop your head over the side," answered the Wogglebug. "In that event, your head would no longer be a pumpkin, for it would become a squash." Have I not asked you to restrain these unfeeling jokes?" demanded Tip, looking at the Wogglebug with a severe expression. "You have, and I've restrained a good many of them," replied the insect. "But there are opportunities for so many excellent puns in our language that, to an educated person like myself, the temptation to express them is almost irresistible." "People with more or less education discovered those puns centuries ago," said Tip. "Are you sure?" asked the Wogglebug with a startled look. "Of course I am," answered the boy. "An educated Wogglebug may be a new thing, but a Wogglebug education is as old as the hills, judging by the display you're making of it." The insect seemed more impressed by this remark, and for a time maintained a meek silence. The Scarecrow, in shifting in his seat, saw upon the cushions the pepper box which Tip had cast aside, and began to examine it. "Throw it overboard," said the boy. "It's quite empty now, and there's no use keeping it." "Is it really empty?" asked the Scarecrow, looking curiously at the box. "Of course it is," answered Tip. "I shook out every grain of the powder." "Then the box has 2 bottoms," announced the Scarecrow, "for the bottom on the inside is fully an inch away from the bottom on the outside." "Let me see," said the Tin Woodman, taking the box from his friend. "Yes," he declared, after looking it over. "The thing certainly has a false bottom. Now I wonder what that's for." "Can you get it apart and find out?" inquired Tip, now quite interested in the mystery. "Why, yes, the lower bottom unscrews," said the Tin Woodman. "My fingers are rather stiff. Please see if you can open it." He handed the pepper box to Tip, who had no difficulty unscrewing the bottom, and in the cavity below there were 3 silver pills, with the carefully folded paper lying underneath them. This paper the boy proceeded to unfold, taking care not to spill the pills, and found several lines clearly written in red ink. "Read it out loud," said the Scarecrow, so Tip read as follows: "Dr. Nicky Dick's celebrated wishing pills. Directions for use. Swallow 1 pill. Count 17 by 2s. Then make a wish. The wish will immediately be granted. Caution. Keep in a dark, dry place." "Why, this is very valuable discovery," cried Scarecrow. "It is indeed," replied Tip gravely. "These pills may be of great use to us. I wonder if old Mombi knew they were in the bottom of the pepper box. I remember hearing her say she got the powder for life from this same Nicky Dick." "He must be a powerful sorcerer," exclaimed the Tin Woodman. "And since the powder proved a success, we ought to have confidence in the pills." "But how," asked the Scarecrow, "can anyone count 17 by 2s? 17 is an odd number." "That is true," replied Tip, greatly disappointed. "No one can possibly count 17 by 2s." "Then the pills are of no use to us," wailed the Pumpkinhead, "and this fact overwhelms me with grief, for I had intended wishing that my head would never spoil." Nonsense, said the Scarecrow sharply. If we could use the pills at all, we would make far better wishers than that. I do not see how anything could be better, protested poor Jack. If you were liable to spoil at any time, you'd understand my anxiety. For my part, said the Tin Woodman, I sympathize with you in every respect. But since we cannot count 17 by twos, sympathy is all you are liable to get. By this time, it had become quite dark, and the voyagers found above them a cloudy sky through which the rays of the moon could not penetrate. The Gump flew steadily on, and for some reason the huge sofa body rocked more and more dizzily every hour. The Wogglebug declared he was seasick, and Tip was also pale and somewhat distressed. But the others clung to the backs of the sofas and did not seem to mind the motion as long as they were not tipped out. Darker and darker grew the night, and on sped the Gump through the black heavens. The travelers could not even see one another, and an oppressive silence settled down upon them. After a long time, Tip, who had been thinking deeply, spoke. "How are we to know when we come to the palace of Glenda the Good?" he asked. "It's a long way to Glenda's palace," answered the Woodman. "I've traveled it." "But how are we to know how fast the Gump is flying?" persisted the boy. "We cannot see a single thing on the earth, and before morning we may be far beyond the palace we want to reach." "That is all true. That is all true enough," the Scarecrow replied, a little uneasily. "But I do not see how we can stop just now, for we might be a light in a river or on the top of a steeple, and that would be a great disaster." So they permitted the Gump to fly on with regular flops of its great wings and waited patiently for morning. Then Tip's fears were proven to be well-founded, for with the first streaks of gray dawn they looked over the sides of the sofas and discovered rolling plains dotted with queer villages, where the houses, instead of being dome-shaped, as they all were in the Land of Oz, had slanted roofs that rose to a peak in the center. Odd-looking animals were also moving about upon the open plains, and the country was unfamiliar to both the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow, who had formerly visited Glenda the Good's domain and knew it well. "We are lost," said the Scarecrow dolefully. "The Gump must have carried us entirely out of the Land of Oz and over the sandy deserts and into the terrible outside world that Dorothy told us about." "We must get back," exclaimed the Tin Woodman earnestly. "We must get back as soon as possible." "Turn around," cried Tip to the Gump. "Turn as quickly as you can." "If I do, I shall upset," answered the Gump. "I'm not at all used to flying, and the best plan would be for me to alight in some place. Then I can turn around and take a fresh start." Just then, however, there seemed to be no stopping place that would answer their purpose. They flew over a village so big that the Wogglebug declared it was a city. And then they came to a range of high mountains with many deep gorges and steep cliffs showing plainly. "Now is our chance to stop," said the boy, finding they were very close to the mountain tops. Then he turned to the Gump and commanded, "Stop at the first level place you see." "Very well," answered the Gump, and settled down upon a table of rock that stood between two cliffs. But not being experienced in such matters, the Gump did not judge his speed correctly, and instead of coming to a stop upon the flat rock, he missed it by half the width of his body, breaking off both his right wings against the sharp edge of the rock, and then tumbling over and over down the cliff. Our friends held on to the sofas as long as they could, but when the Gump caught on a projecting rock, the thing stopped suddenly, bottom side up, and all were immediately dumped out. By good fortune, they fell only a few feet, for underneath them was a monster nest, built by a colony of jackdaws in a hollow ledge of the rock, so none of them, not even the Pumpkinhead, was injured by the fall. For Jack found his precious head resting on a soft breast of the Scarecrow, which made an excellent cushion, and Tip fell on a mass of leaves and papers, which saved him from injury. The Wogglebug had bumped his round head against the sawhorse, but without causing him more than a moment's inconvenience. The Tin Woodman was at first much alarmed, but finding he had escaped without even a scratch upon his beautiful nickel plate, he at once regained his accustomed cheerfulness and turned to address his comrades. "Our journey had ended rather suddenly," he said. And we cannot justly blame our friend the Gump for our accident, because he did his best he could under the circumstances. But how are we ever to escape from this nest? I must leave to someone with better brains than I possess. Here he gazed at the scarecrow, who crawled to the edge of the nest, looked over. Below them was a sheer precipice several hundred feet in depth. Above them was a smooth cliff, unbroken save for the point of rock where the wrecked body of the Gump still hung suspended from the end of one of the sofas. There really seemed to be no means of escape, and as they realized their helpless plight, the little band of adventurers gave way to their bewilderment. This is a worse prison than the palace, sadly remarked the Wogglebug. I wish we had stayed there, groaned Jack. I'm afraid the mountain air isn't good for pumpkins. It won't be when the jackdaws come back, growled the sawhorse, which lay waving its legs in vain endeavor to get upon its feet again. Jackdaws are especially fond of pumpkins. Do you think the birds will come here? Asked Jack, much distressed. Of course they will, said Tip, for this is their nest, and there must be hundreds of them, he continued, for see what a lot of things they have brought here. Indeed, the nest was half filled with the most curious collections of small articles for which the birds could have no use, but which the thieving jackdaws had stolen during many years from the homes of men, and, as the nest was safely hidden, where no human beings could reach it, this lost property would never be recovered. The Wogglebug, searching among the rubbish for the jackdaws, stole useless things as well as valuable ones, turned up with his foot in a beautiful diamond necklace. This was so greatly admired by the Tin Woodman that the Wogglebug presented it to him with a graceful speech, after which the Woodman hung it around his neck with much pride, rejoicing exceedingly when the big diamonds glittered in the sun's rays. But now they heard a great jabbering and flapping of wings, and as the sound grew nearer to them, Tip exclaimed, "The jackdaws are coming, and if they find us here, they will surely kill us in their anger." "I was afraid of this," moaned the Pumpkinhead. "My time has come." "And mine also," said the Wogglebug, "for jackdaws are the greatest enemies of my race." The others were not at all afraid, but the Scarecrow at once decided to save those of the party who were liable to be injured by the angry birds. So he commanded Tip to take off Jack's head and lie down with it in the bottom of the nest, and when this was done, he ordered the Wogglebug to lay beside Tip. Nick Chopper, who knew from past experiences just what to do, then took the Scarecrow to pieces, all except his head, and scattered the straw over Tip and the Wogglebug, completely covering their bodies. Hardly had this been accomplished when a flock of jackdaws reached them. Perceiving their intruders in the nest, the birds flew down upon them with screams of rage. Hi everyone, Lori's still hanging in. Let's see, we're right at about that 2-hour mark, y'all, so I'm just taking a look and seeing how long this last chapter is. But we may call it there. Yep, that's exactly on point. In fact, that's probably the best place to stop with the crew in the jackdaw nest. So I think that is where we are going to stop for the night. We did make it through our 9 chapters, so I think that is a beautiful place to stop. The next chapter is Dr. Nick Dick's famous wishing pills. So I'm assuming this is how they're going to be getting out of this mess. But I really hope that y'all enjoyed this. I super appreciate y'all hanging out with me. I know that there was about 7 of you here. Whether you were just lurking or using me as background noise so you could fall asleep or while sleeping. Just having your all support really means the world to me. And watch hours or not, I truly appreciate just having the forum and the opportunity to do this. Thank you, Absolutely, I appreciate you. Is there anybody live right now, Boo, that you can see? JB, I appreciate you hanging out, man, and was definitely a nice little add to the story. It started getting a little intense there. And we went through a lot. We found the woodman, went back to the Emerald City, left the Emerald City, came back to the Emerald City. Left it again, and now we're going to go see Glinda the Good Witch. And there's 3 wishing pills. I'm very curious to know what 3 wishes they're going to make. Very curious to know. We're just taking a look right now. I know there's not very many of us here, but figured if we can go and raid somebody for the night, we can do that. And me, I'm fixing to eat a big old dinner. And Rob's always fun to raid. Yeah, we can go and raid Rob. Let's go and do that. Nice and big, he always gives us the love as well, and it's been a minute since we've popped over there to raid. And I don't think Bro's streaming tonight. So yeah, we can go and raid Red or Blue. Alright, y'all, we're gonna go in. Yeah, Rob. Let's go raid Rob. We're gonna go raid Rob, y'all. If you want to join us for the raid, absolutely, we would appreciate that. If not, I hope y'all have a beautiful night, sleep well, and remember, don't let anything stop you from getting what it is that you truly want to achieve. But it takes $0 to be a good person, and truly believe you all, or appreciate you all for believing in ghosts. And thanks for joining me for story time, y'all. Lori, thank you so much for that and everything you do. And yeah, I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your night. Let's go raid Rob.